Hi, welcome back to the Golf Youth Forum on Bayou Time. We're here with our panelists, representatives of the youth of this area, to ask our experts, Mr. Ted Fagu and Mr. Mike Voisin, questions concerning the Gulf oil spill. Let's start with Ali Fagu again. Ali, please state your question.
Mr. Voisin, how is this crisis currently affecting the seafood harvesting and processing industries?
The seafood community is in Louisiana, of course, is number one in producing a significant amount of seafood here in South Louisiana. We're number one in shrimp, oysters, crabs, crawfish, alligator, a number of seafood species we're number one in. There have been closures since the beginning all along the coastal areas based upon the predictions that NOAA was putting out about oil potentially moving into an area. So there were a number of closures. Those closures, of course, occurred at the end of April, beginning of May, and the first weekend in May is Mother's Day, which is the number one eating out day of the year. So everybody takes their moms out to eat. Well, when that occurred, what happened was the distribution of seafood products, because you couldn't harvest them in a large portion of the state, all of a sudden the market went relatively crazy. People were looking for product. There were shortages in different areas. So what wound up happening was people realigned themselves with different distributors, different processors, different harvesters. But the processing community needs product. So the state, in reaction to that, Wildlife and Fisheries opened areas, closed areas, Health opened and closed areas based on these projections, and then also they ground truthed it. They went out and looked to see, is there oil in that area? Is there the potential of oil in that area? So it disrupted the market. Probably the largest thing it did, though, was create the sense of Americans that oil and seafood from the Gulf is synonymous. And Americans are now beginning to say, maybe we'll eat chicken wings instead of a shrimp cocktail as an appetizer, and maybe we'll have that steak instead of that nice piece of grouper as our main course.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Mike. Our next question is from Danielle Johnson. Danielle.
Mr. Voisin, what determines whether or not our local seafood is safe to eat?
Well, the state, along with the federal agencies, are doing more samples than they've ever done relating to seafood in South Louisiana. Post-Hurricane Katrina, there were a significant amount of, tens of thousands of samples done to assure the quality and sanitation of the seafood products. There's probably been that many or more done in this crisis. We've got the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, the Department of Health and Hospitals, NOAA, EPA, DEQ, everybody is taking them, as well as universities are out there analyzing what the potential impacts are. I was kidding with a researcher the other day, and I said, you know, by the time we take all of these samples, there's not going to be any seafood left for us to harvest, because there's so many of those people out there making sure that your seafood is safe. I will tell you, yesterday, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, through the National Marine Fisheries Service, actually said the seafood coming from the Gulf is pristine. It is sampled more than any seafood anywhere in the world, and what they're sampling has no hint of oil in it at all.
So it could be argued that this is the safest time to eat seafood. It's being most inspected.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Danielle. Will, your question.
Mr. Voisin, how can we see seafood prices change in the future due to the oil spill?
Well, we saw the initial bump, and the bump occurred as a result of what I talked about. It was Mother's Day and the challenges of distribution. Also, when you take about half of the state was closed, 60% at a point. Take half of a state and close it, and it's number one in anything, supply-demand gets in the way. All of a sudden you got less supply, the same constant demand, which means that you're going to have price increases. What we've seen is in oysters, which probably took the largest price increase at the harvest level, we've seen about a 50% dockside value increase for oysters, which in turn means the processor has to get more for it, the restaurant has to charge more for it, and then also the retailer has to get more for that product. Shrimp actually went up, kind of stabilized a little bit, and in some size ranges has actually gone down a little bit because they've opened more areas. Originally there were aggressive closures, now we've seen more aggressive openings occurring. Crabs actually went up and have fallen down a little bit because they're able to get out there and harvest the crabs, and they're available at this time. Other species have either stayed the same or gone up based upon how much of that product is in the market. Originally, a lot of the shortages were met with inventories, frozen inventories that we produce throughout the year and maintain as freezers. We were able to get rid of a lot of those inventories. Right now, nobody's able to put up inventories. So real concerns come this fall, this winter, when there's not as much production. We'll probably see additional price hikes because demand is going to be, again, exceeding the supply. Other things internationally, things like Vietnam is not producing any product at all at this time, which is creating another shortage for shrimp in this country, which means that pricing will go up naturally anyway because of international imports that are occurring in our market.
Thank you, Mr. Voisin. Our fourth question is from Andrea Downtown.
Mr. Voisin, what is this crisis doing to the Louisiana brand of seafood?
That's a great question. I think that's my biggest concern. Andre, that's my biggest concern. We've, for generations, built this brand of Louisiana seafood. It's known for its quality. It's known for its good taste. It's known for its availability. The brand of Louisiana seafood has been tarnished for a significant period of time. You know, we compare, a lot of people compare this, and there's really not many comparisons, but a lot of people compare this disaster to the Exxon Valdez disaster. It took Alaska 5 years to make itself back to what it was prior to that in terms of its seafood reputation or brand. I think we're going to see that we're going to have similar challenges. We're starting to see people order those chicken wings for appetizers instead of shrimp cocktails. We're starting to see those things happen. That concerns me. But it would concern me also if I saw it about another product somewhere else and I saw something that looked as bad as the oil spill has looked and been portrayed in the press, and then a picture of seafood right next to it. I think it's our biggest hit in the seafood community. A lot of that oil has not come on shore. The greatest oiled area for seafood right now is Paso Lutra at the foot of the river, and then the Barataria Bay down around the Grand Isle area. That system seems to be oiled. We have 7,500 miles of shoreline in South Louisiana. Only 180 of those have seen oil at this point. The seafood resource, I think, is going to be good. It's going to be strong. The oil doesn't seem to be coming aggressively inshore, except in a couple of areas at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Voisin. And thank you, Andrea. Our fifth question is coming from Jacob Hutchison. Jacob.
Hi. I was wondering how many jobs are at risk in the seafood industry presently and you foresee in the future?
Well, there's a number of jobs that are dependent on seafood in our community, from the harvesters, the captains, the deckhands, the dock workers, the truck drivers, the packaging suppliers, the processors, the process workers, the administrators at the processing plants, the truckers that deliver it out, the guy at the restaurant that receives it, the guy that cooks it, the guy that serves it, the guy that eats it, the guy that delivers it to your table. There's so many different people that are impacted by this. How many of those will be impacted? From Louisiana, because we are such a large producer, there were a number of those people that were impacted during May, less during June because we had a lot of openings occur in June, more openings and closures. We normally have 4 openings and closings of harvest areas in a year. In the month of May, about 6 weeks from May 1st to the middle of June, we had 35 openings and closings. So the community itself was trying to keep up with these rapid-fire openings and closings. I would say that we're probably in South Louisiana, there's probably 20,000 to 30,000 jobs that are directly related to the seafood community. In terms of the economic multipliers, the truckers and all of that, there's probably another 30,000 jobs. They've all been impacted somewhat relating to this. To what extent will depend on how long closures occur. Overall, I think we'll come back and be stronger, but it's going to take us time once we get over that brand challenge that we're dealing with right now in the marketplace.